Today we are wrapping up our discussion of Zen and Eastern philosophy. We'll start off with the three different states of a Zen mind. So the first thing they call is Shoshin, but I've described it a lot this year as the beginner's mind. If you have the beginner's mind, you just have a mindset, an attitude, an outlook of enthusiasm, of optimism, of wonder. And this is getting rid of all of your preconceptions, emptying out your mind of everything you think you know, and truly be a beginner so that you can actually learn something. If you can stay in Shoshin, you're not thinking a lot, and you're not anticipating what's going to happen. You're just with fresh eyes, open-eyed, taking in the world as it occurs. The beginner's mind is one of the most important things to achieve that Zen place of just peacefulness. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind was a book by Suzuki Roshi. I think I have it in a folder you can take a look at. But if you can achieve this and just be optimistic, open-minded, you'll see life begins to sort of present itself differently. The goal of practice is always to keep your beginner's mind. This doesn't mean a closed mind, but actually an empty mind and a ready mind. If your mind is empty, it's always ready for everything. It's always open to everything. Next, number 2, fiducian, which is the immovable mind. It's hard to do this, but the idea is you have complete control over yourself, especially in a stressful situation. In other words, life outside of our brain causes us to have to often react. And usually how people react is they flip out internally when bad things happen. This immovable mind actually allows you to stay calm and collected even during a tough situation. So the idea of someone sitting peacefully in the eye of a tornado, that's it's impossible to do that. But when life gets a little bit rough, can you have that immovable mind that is open but not freaking out? Think about it. When the bad event happens in our life, all of those shitty things, we can look at it a lot of different ways. We usually can't fix the problem, but we can definitely make it worse by having a mind that kind of jumps all over the place. And finally, number 3, Mushin. Mushin is being without mind. This is kind of like Wu Wei that we learned with Taoism. It's just kind of being in the zone. Because when you're doing what you want to do, your identity, your egoic mind has dissolved into the moment. You're not thinking, and now I do this, and now I do that. You're just acting. When you can completely empty yourself of thoughts and all of those negative emotions, and even positive emotions, you no longer are planning out, but you're just acting. Think about what anxiety is. Anxiety is what's going to happen next. And ultimately, we're not going to know until we get there. The idea of being in the zone is approaching each moment without mind, without thought, in an empty way of being. Not Thinking of You, a Zen birthday card. So here's a story. Counterclockwise was the study done by Ellen Langer. In the study, they took elderly men, older, over 75, and they put them into a 5-day retreat. They were all in decent health. One group, they were told it's 20 years ago, so it was 1959, and the other group said, think about, reflect back on if it was 20 years ago. So the first group completely immerses themselves. They're going to live as if it's 1959. The results, when they compared the men in the control group who only reflected, in other words, they were thinking, remember how it was way back when? The men in the experimental group, the ones who lived it, who literally took off watches if watches weren't around in 1959, they looked on average of 3 years younger after the study, done by a number of different people looking at pictures. They showed improved hearing and psychological functioning. They increased lots of better weight, better vision. How is that possible just by thinking it was 20 years ago? Ellen Langer's quote, "It is not primarily our physical selves that limit us, but rather our mindset about our physical limits." So these old people were acting as if they were 20 years old before, and they actually were more vitalized. They were more energetic, and it showed actually in their tests. It's more of a mindset. You sometimes have heard age is just a number. I think this study kind of proves that's probably true. The mind is its own place, and in itself it can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. We can look at one thing, just a fact, and we can take it either of those two different directions. Unfortunately, more people make a hell of the heaven that is. Next concept in Zen philosophy is the ego, which we've talked about quite a lot. A couple of cartoons on the right. What's the meaning of life? But make it quick. I've got an important meeting in a half hour. I think probably watches and time does not have to do with the meaning of life. And on the left, kids have asked me this before. What do you do when you have freed yourself of all desire except the desire to be free from desire? Because the idea of Buddhism, of course, is desire causes suffering. So if you want to get rid of desire, well, then you're desiring that. And that's obviously a little bit backwards. All egoic thoughts limits our vast mind. When we have no thought of achievement, no thought of self, we are true beginners. Then we can really learn something. The beginner's mind is the mind of compassion. You should achieve things. You can think of yourself. But when you actually dissolve your being, dissolve I am doing this into the moment with the beginner's mind, things happen a lot better and life sometimes cooperates a little bit more, or at least it appears so because the mind is not protesting. Know yourself as the being underneath or behind the thinker, the stillness underneath the mental noise, the love and joy underneath the pain. So this goes back to the idea that we have awareness of what's going on, but we also need to become aware of the way we're thinking and maybe where we're actually causing ourselves more problems. The mind, a beautiful servant, a dangerous master. This is a first day slide. The mind is useful to complete tasks, but when it is bored, it tends to cause us more problems. It becomes the master. Part of understanding the egoic mind is you, the awareness, become the master, and you let the thoughts go away if they are not productive. It's hard, it requires practice, but it's very beneficial. Next, perfection of life. This is a kind of interesting one. Some kids have an issue with it. Detach from needing to have things work out in a certain way. The universe is perfect, and there are no failures. No flake ever falls in the wrong place. Well, I had a kid a couple years ago say, oh, wait, the Holocaust was perfect? You know, like the big disaster was perfect? And no, you can't make that argument. But then again, only thing that makes something good or bad is the mind. Life does what life does. Maybe we can't possibly understand how some evil event, some bad events, could be quote-unquote perfect. But then again, they exist. Anything other than that is us just judging. The idea that no snowflake ever falls in the wrong place is interesting to me because it's saying that we can't understand why things happen the way they happen, but maybe everything happens is perfect. Some kids hate this concept, but it makes you judge life a little bit less and look at the terrible events as just things that stimulate, life moving forward. Nothing we see or hear is perfect, but right there in the imperfection is perfect reality. Life's not perfect. The imperfection is how reality is. But kids are perfectionists. They want to make everything exactly perfect. And that's why oftentimes the most driven often drive themselves a little bit cuckoo clock. The Zen Thinker allows nature and life just to unfold without expecting or judging. We don't understand why things happen the way they happen, but we need to learn how to embrace it. When we fight against what is, we end up suffering more. I tend to say this over and over again, but yet people still fight against what is. When you really look at what emotions are, life acts, we resist, and then you get negative emotions. Versus life is just doing what life is doing, and then we look at it in such a way, sometimes justified, that makes it that much worse. The obstacle in the path becomes the path. Never forget, within every obstacle is an opportunity to improve our condition. Obstacles are things we don't want to have to deal with, and we have to deal with them every day living life. And the idea is looking at an obstacle as a way of growth, as a way to improve, as a way, whether we like it or not, we can kick and scream and cry, but we need to get over that obstacle, over, around it, sideways, whatever it takes, and with that we will grow. Here's a quote that most kids misinterpret, and I like it a lot. Not that they misinterpret it, but I like the quote. Everything and everyone is your teacher unless you are a poor student. Now, poor not meaning money, poor meaning that you're not having the beginner's mind. If you open your mind, everything and everyone becomes your teacher. The evil ex-girlfriend who did you wrong, you can learn about yourself from her. And that's sort of the key thing. The beginner's mind is looking at everything as an opportunity, is looking at everything with wonder. The closed-minded person generally does not. The meaning of life is just to be alive. It's so plain and so obvious and so simple, and yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. This is Alan Watts. He's a British philosopher who was had expertise in Eastern philosophy. People are so driven in our society. You see a long line outside of coffee places every morning so we can get caffeine, so we can face the day. And interacting with kids in high school, everybody wants to become something. And that's great. Having goals is great. But the idea is maybe the happiness that you're postponing until you achieve your goals at the age of 42, maybe that happiness could be found now. You don't have to achieve something beyond yourself. That's not even possible. Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement. Here's the way to deal with it in Zen. You're perfect the way you are now. Now, even with your flaws, that's perfection. And you can use some improvement. Be happy with who you are and move in a direction to become better, but without the need to fix yourself, because you're not broken unless you think you are. And that brings back the whole mind concept of thoughts. And finally, the present moment with Zen philosophy. Alan Watts, this is the real secret of life. To be completely engaged with what you are doing in the here and now, and instead of calling it work, realize it's play. Here's Ram Dass. It is possible to stay in the moment and be it, to live it. But once your mind begins to try to categorize and analyze and judge, you have created a separation which does not allow you to be at peace with the moment that is. Not the moment you wish it was. This is so hard to do, to stop analyzing and categorizing and judging. It's something that's ingrained in us our whole lives. And the idea is, while it has some benefit to analyze and categorize and judge, we've gone way too far and we've obscured what it is that we are judging. We think the real thing is our thoughts about it, not what is. By replacing fear of the unknown with a curiosity, we open ourselves up to an infinite stream of possibility. We can let fear rule our lives, and we can become childlike with curiosity, pushing our boundaries, leaping out of our comfort zones, and accepting what life puts before us. It's a choice. I mean, when we did Taoism, we did Winnie the Pooh, and like Wednesday's a good day to be lost. And the other characters, Eeyore and Piglet, they represent the different types of mind that are always complaining. If you can become more childlike and be okay with leaving your comfort zone, life becomes a little bit different. It's not something to be feared, but rather to be anticipated and experienced. Boredom is really just a lack of attention of the moment. When you see something with new eyes and truly observe it with a beginner's mind, the world becomes extraordinary in a gradual unfolding. When we do not expect anything, we can be ourselves. That is our way to live fully at each moment of time. You should be rather grateful for the weeds, because eventually they will enrich you. The weeds meaning the things in life that we don't enjoy that occur, but ultimately we can learn from them rather than just kick and scream and not want that. Treat every moment as your last. It's not preparation for something else. Zen is not some kind of excitement, but concentration on our usual everyday routine. If you just sit there and watch a baby bird feed its child in a nest, that is Zen. Our thoughts, our opinions don't add anything. Just those Zen moments, concentrating on what's happening every day, it becomes more of a wonder than a been there, done that. To study Zen Buddhism is to study the self. That means us. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be awakened by all things. So what does that mean? Studying the self and realizing what you really are. You are a commentator on the world. That's what you've become. And when you begin to study how your commentary really is probably making your life more difficult, you can stop doing that as much. You can, instead of being a commentator, a narrator, a judger, you become more of a witness of what happens. And in that way, you become more awakened by all that is life because you're paying attention. You're not paying attention just to your own thoughts. So what is happiness? Is it a goal? Is it an achievement? Is it the journey? I'll have kids answer different ways on this one. Obviously, when you achieve a goal or you made an achievement, that brings happiness. Some kids say it's the journey. Or is it really just a state of mind? Can we achieve happiness without any external events? So there's two types of happiness. Unfortunately, most people fall into number one, dependent future happiness. What does that mean? Something has to occur. I'm going to get the job I want, or I'm going to meet my future wife, or I'm going to have my house, or I'm going to be able to move out. It's a mindset that when you change your current situation, then you'll be happy. I can't wait until I get out of this town. I can't wait until I have my own car. All of these things might be true, but you are dependent on them. The other type of happiness, the independent type, is just realizing that you, in the way you look at the world right now, could achieve happiness. If not happiness, a hopeful wonder. We'll leave it at that, because some kids want to argue what happy is. It's more a state of mind. If you focus on the journey every step along the way, that's how you make your life happy. It's the people who just focus on a goal. They're not paying attention to the steps of their journey, and it's the steps in the journey where your life takes place. You need to be happy in that moment. You need to manifest that yourself through changing perhaps the way your mind is over-analytical, over-critical. The future is a concept. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as tomorrow. There will never be, because time is always now. That's one of the things we discover when we stop talking to ourselves and stop thinking. We find there is only present, only an eternal now. There's a great Alan Watts video, I won't really play on here, but it's in your folder, which really shows sort of the quest to move up the ladder of life. It's a cartoon done by the South Park guys. I will link that for you. And finally, we come to the different types of practice that they do in Zen. Zazen, koans, and satsang. First, Zazen. Zazen is a type of meditation. Seeing the mind is becoming the Buddha. So Zazen is the type of meditation that instead of concentrating on something, you see your mind. You see how your mind operates, the egoic mind. And in doing so, you basically pull its weapons away from it. And in being that you no longer are sabotaging yourself with your mind, then you can become more Buddha-like, meaning more awakened to the world. So their type of meditation, Zazen, is just sitting in a quiet room and realizing that right now the only thing that's not quiet is probably your mind. And by seeing that, you learn to quiet it. Next, koans. A koan is a riddle that cannot be solved. They use them as a way to break out of your typical thinking patterns. Think about it in general. You have a problem that occurred years ago, some life event that you don't like, you call it a problem, and you try to think about it over and over and over. You never fix it, but you never give up either. A koan is designed to frustrate you because you can't figure it out, so that you stop thinking, which is the goal of Zen. I'll give you a couple of examples of them in the upcoming slides. Example of a koan. This one's actually figure-outable, I think. A student is filled with emotion and crying and asks to the teacher, "Why is there so much suffering?" Suzuki Roshi replied, "No reason." Now, some people don't really understand what this means. If you were to think about it, you could figure it out that a lot of the suffering we have isn't based on a reason other than our own choice in how we perceive life. We don't like it, life sold our Halloween candy, and then we're full of emotion and crying. Is there a reason for this? Well, it's because we misunderstand life. This one isn't a true koan. The next one, it will break your mind a little bit more. If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Well, this makes no sense to anybody until you realize the Buddha means the awakened one. And if someone is saying they are the Buddha, obviously they're not awakened, because that would show they're the egoic mind. And if you think somebody is the Buddha, meaning somebody is awakened, then you are judging them and analyzing them to be somehow better than you. You need to kill that image in your mind, because you too could become a Buddha. The idea of these koans are little short riddles, and some of them don't make sense, and some of them are wicked deep, but they are part of the Zen practice. Finally, satsang. Satsang is a Sanskrit word that means gathering together for truth. So satsang is basically discussion groups, like this talking circles, Socratic circles, somebody said they were similar to. But the idea is everybody's looking to grow and learn, and you can learn from each other. Satsang would be organized sit-downs, if you will, of people trying to achieve the same goal, which is freedom from the way our minds tend to obscure reality. Zen Crossword Puzzle. Across, nothing. Down, nothing. Now, the idea of Zen seems, people say nothing, they don't really understand what it means, or emptiness. It's trying to say that you are creating life in your minds. Do a better job of just observing life that's in the world. And I like this final slide to wrap up our Eastern philosophy discussion. Tend to Zen. Let go of comparing, competing, judgments, anger, regrets, worrying, blame, guilt, fear. Have a belly laugh at least once a day. Some of these are hard. Comparing, it's been ingrained in your system. Competing won't leave America. We are a competitive sort. Judgments, not just of each other, but of the world. Anger, regrets, worrying, blame, these are all manifestations of our own emotions that hurt us in some way. When we blame other people, does it really achieve anything? Letting go of guilt and fear and having a little more positive outlook on life. I hope you got something out of Eastern philosophy, and please write a journal, and I will talk to you all soon.